Fate? Fate. Explanatory note by Vyacheslav Bakulin. A strange thing, I tell you, this fate of yours, ours. You can believe in it or not, you can fear it or laugh at it, you can try to change it, or you can simply lie down, spread your arms, and surrender to the will of the waves. Maybe they won't drown you, the dear ones, but they'll carry you somewhere. What's especially nice is that no matter what type of behavior you choose, in any case, all the vicissitudes of life, and in general, everything that happens to us, from the loss of a baby tooth to the decline of morals in society, from a career takeoff to a jump in blood pressure, can be written down as a plus with a steady hand. Because no matter what happens outside and inside me, I stubbornly, despite everything, didn't believe, didn't fear, and didn't try to change anything. That's why, and for no other reason it is. There are people who not only deny the existence of fate and any higher predestination that does not depend on a person, but also made butting heads with it their signature move. Butting heads selflessly and uncompromisingly, so as not to ask for mercy and, of course, not to give it. Even if it's long been dark/red/white in their eyes, even if their forehead is broken and bleeding, and their muscles and tendons desperately beg for at least a short respite, but heads, and no nails. But heads until the very end, and whether you're with a shield or on a shield in the finale, well, that's how it'll crossed out. Thickly twice? With an exclamation mark, turn out. Such people, by the way, are not uncommon among rabid atheists, who can quite compete in madness with the same rabid religious fanatics, and it's not even a fact who will win. After all, wise Sir Henry Layard was right once again, when he noted that fanatics know how to light fires or burn on them. And that, alas, is all they know how to do. Professional Prometheuses, Don Quixotes, and Che Guevaras. A terrible sight, no matter how you look at it. With all due respect to all three legendary characters. You know why. How can you fight something you don't believe in? Here, imagine as a clear example, I don't believe, let's say, in America. In the most direct sense. That is, there is no such country, and never has been. Neither their democracy, nor the Pentagon, nor the evergreen currency. And even the existence of the continent, you know, is highly questionable. And what that Spanish navigator of Italian origin discovered there, we still need to see. It's no accident that it was named after someone else, oh, no accident. So, I don't believe, and yet I fight. What's it doing really, huh? As if it might do something not. And here I am, going to anti-American rallies, fully supporting our guys against their guys, boycotting the cursed fast food with the letter M. I'll run into the free toilet though, but only when I really have to, but otherwise no way, and waiting for them to finally revive Osoi Vike Chiam to destroy the enemies. In whom I do not believe. Did you appreciate it? So, believe it or not, but it's still preferable to have a head on your shoulders. To avoid. Mole glanced absently at the railcar again and tensed. Another familiar face, it could hardly be a coincidence. Mole would have sworn he'd seen this guy somewhere, a gaunt figure, narrow face, short, light hair with gray streaks, a long nose, watery, close-set eyes, looking almost distracted. Mole wanted to turn away, but he didn't have time. The guy caught his eye and nodded familiarly, like an old acquaintance. It was too late to pretend he hadn't noticed, and Mole nodded back. The guy approached him, extending his hand. Mole squeezed it dry, narrow, rough. He squeezed hard. The man winced slightly. He was a head taller, and therefore seemed to look down on his interlocutor condescendingly. Hi! So you got signed up for this too? Asked the guy, whose name Mole still couldn't remember. Maybe, Mole replied evasively. He felt it was pointless to deny it. His secret mission would soon cease to be a secret. Of course, the man could have meant something completely different, but Mole felt in his gut that there was no mistake. They were here for the same reason. And was it worth continuing to hide? Okay, I need to meet with someone else here. Let's meet in the canteen tonight, the lanky guy suggested, as if he had no doubt that Mole would agree. And Mole nodded. What else could he do? His interlocutor headed towards the entrance to the hotel complex. Mole finally remembered him, a fellow stalker. His nickname popped into his head, Lidvin. Or maybe that was his real last name. Mole even remembered where he had seen him in Polis. In the state located on the Lenin Library and the neighboring 3 stations, where the surviving books and knowledge were stored, probably the last place where book wisdom was still valued. Brahmins, keepers, who traced their lineage back to the employees of the great library, and Kshatriyas, warriors, predominated there. The Brahmins had tattoos in the form of a book on their temples, but Lidvin had no tattoo. And yet Mole could have sworn that he was well known in Polis. And with this manner of his looking down on his interlocutors, the lanky guy looked very much like the Brahmins. Meanwhile, he asked the guard at the entrance to the complex something. Mole turned away, and when he looked back, he noticed a new character. A tall man in protective uniform and a cap with a red star was explaining something to Lidvin, frowning. Lidvin's interlocutor even tore off his cap in the heat of the moment, exposing his bald spots. His rough, weathered, red face was wrinkled. Next to the man stood a thin, pale creature in a protective colored shirt that hung on his shoulders like on a hanger, baggy pants that didn't fall down only thanks to a belt tightened at the waist, massive boots, and a black baseball cap. And here's the Pathfinder. Last time he had a different trainee, a short, stocky guy. I wonder where he went? You wouldn't envy anyone whom the Pathfinder takes to train, boring to death. The stalker from the Red Line, nicknamed Red Pathfinder, was known to his colleagues as a harmful and stubborn type. Even the fact that he took such a nickname spoke volumes. On the Red Line, all stalkers were called Red Pathfinders, and this one, apparently, considered himself the reddest of all. However, now Mole was not concerned with the character of the Pathfinder, with whom many had already managed to collide. Mole sensed with his nose, with that sixth sense that so often allowed him to escape from danger, something was brewing. Too often he came across familiar faces here today. No, he had seen gatherings here before. Taganskaya Koltsevaya was a lively place. Sometimes those who proudly called themselves hunters gathered here. They could be seen from afar. Understandable, because from here there is a direct road to Proletarskia, to the training ground. The hunters drank, noisily boasting to each other about their equipment and trophies. Mole and the like secretly despised them. Of course, it's easy to shoot a wounded, exhausted mutant at the training ground, who, risking himself, was carefully delivered from the surface for you by stalkers, tied up and humbled. But you try to grapple with the same mutant upstairs, in the dead city, where he is in his element, and you have a chemical suit on, restricting movement, and a gas mask, limiting visibility. Try to defeat him there, then it will be clear whether you have the right to call yourself a hunter. Yes, there may be only a few real hunters in the entire metro. Or maybe only one of all truly deserve the right to call himself a hunter. Hunter. A pale woman in camouflage, in black gloves with cut-off fingers, flashed in the crowd, nervously looking around. Unevenly cut hair, opening one ear, completely hid the other. The scar on her face was barely noticeable. It seemed to Mole that something ominous was blowing. What did she need here? No, of course, it could be assumed that all these people converged here and today absolutely by chance. But life taught Mole not to trust random coincidences. Too often a pattern was visible behind the randomness. He sighed, took out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, on which only 2 words were scrawled in pencil unevenly, as if in a hurry, reread them again, carefully folded the note, and put it back in his pocket. Yes, definitely today there are too many like him gathered here, fortune hunters. Mole was one of those who, after the catastrophe, made forays into the slowly collapsing city on the surface, looking for something that could still be useful to the population of the underground. In essence, he took what did not belong to him, but his profession was called a sonorous word that made the hearts of girls flutter. Stalker. And people like him enjoyed universal respect among the residents of the underground. Because now it was very dangerous to get out to the surface, and what remained there, in fact, no longer belonged to anyone and gradually deteriorated, became unusable, rusted, became covered with mold. After the catastrophe, the few survivors lost everything. Apartments in the city became almost as inaccessible and useless for their former owners as, for example, plots on Mars. Stalkers searched the ruins for everything that could still bring at least some benefit to the remnants of the population. Food, sometimes still edible. The survivors didn't have to be picky. Medicines whose expiration date had long expired, weapons, gas masks, chemical suits. Even cosmetics, so that women could decorate themselves. It is clear that this was not a cheap pleasure, and not everyone could afford it. Cosmetics were bought only by those who had enough of the universal currency of the Metro cartridges, and therefore it was easy to judge the coolness of her father or patron by the appearance of a woman. On the Hanseatic League there were still more or less well-groomed women, not like on remote stations, where girls blacken their eyebrows with charcoal and insert iron rings into their ears. Mole chuckled. Yes, at his home station he was assured of admiring glances from young snotty girls, and even lonely women of age looked at him with secret hope. Most of them would not mind finding a life partner and protector in his face, especially since in the Metro a lonely woman was, in fact, easy prey for any rogue. But he was not interested in them, perhaps because all their feelings and aspirations were too clearly read in their eyes at first glance. However, well-groomed and bitchy Hanseatic women also did not particularly appeal to him. He had to admit he had not yet met the woman of his dreams, although he had adventures. However, what are his years for a man under 30? Life is just beginning. And women here, in the Metro, age much earlier than men from the hard life, bad air, lack of sun. Besides, there's no point for a stalker to make plans for the future. His profession is full of surprises. Today he's alive and well, and tomorrow he might not return from another mission. Perhaps, this very circumstance made women's hearts beat faster, which Mole sometimes took advantage of. And yet, he was far from handsome. His closely set eyes and small black mustache gave him a resemblance to the animal after which he got his nickname. Still, upon learning what he does, most women start looking at him with special attention. It's nice to sometimes see an admiring glance. You start to seem much cooler and braver than you really are. Although, let's be honest, stalkers are different too. They themselves knew each other's worth in their circle, understood who was worth what. There are those like the legendary hunter, those who were lucky enough to see him talk about it with bated breath. He exists as if on his own, sets tasks for himself, the scale of which is staggering. He thinks about the fate of the entire Metro. We're no match for him, Mole thought. We are simple hard workers, the salt of the earth, although we are also capable of something. Mole sometimes had to deal with competitors. He had normal relations with some, and not with others. But most stalkers knew each other, and preferred to solve many issues together. They were allowed to pass at all stations, whatever the current relations between the main powers of the Metro, the Hansa, located on the Circle Line, in whose territory he was at the moment, the Fourth Reich, which occupied Pushkinskaya, Chekhovskaya and Tverskaya, and the Red Line, headed by the Secretary-General Comrade Moskvin. There were also all sorts of alliances and confederations, but only these states had real influence. And also, perhaps, Polis, the only place where they still tried to preserve civilization. There, general meetings of stalkers were sometimes even held, where pressing issues were jointly resolved. However, there were persistent rumors about the legendary Emerald City in the basements of the Moscow State University building, but they have not yet been confirmed. It would be interesting to equip an expedition there sometime, Mole once thought. Although this thought had already occurred to someone before him, but no expedition had even managed to get close to that place, or even find out whether the main building was still standing or had collapsed long ago. What if he succeeded? They say that this cat, with a scar, one of the few female stalkers, led a squad there, but they did not reach the legendary high rise, of course. Of the entire squad, only one survived, and he told how it was. And if it weren't for Kat, he wouldn't have returned either. True, getting involved with her is more trouble than it's worth, she's too nervous. Who knows what will come into her head? And this person cannot stand men. There are some dark rumors about her, as if it is better not to cross her path alone in the tunnel. Women have strange logic, so, when they hire her as a guide, pay with cartridges, she provides security, and when she walks on her own, it is better not to get in her way. Although she seems to have reasons to hate people, they say she is not quite human, a mutant. And she has her own score to settle with representatives of the opposite sex, a scar in place of a severed extra finger, a mutilated ear. But you can't lump everyone together, even if some freaks have offended her badly. Mole was tolerant of mutants. He was more embarrassed by the fact that a woman was taking on a man's job. She is desperate, of course, you can't take that away from her. Still, it's not women's business to go upstairs with weapons. Sighing, Mole tried to focus on the problems of the day. Wow, he mused, it's really an interesting picture. Stalkers from the Hansa, the Red Line, Polis, almost all the major powers have gathered at one station at the same time. Only someone from the Reich is missing for complete happiness. But these stalkers from the Reich, as they are called behind their backs on the Red Line, prefer to keep to themselves. Could it really be that someone has dug up something important in the vicinity? And we were all sent on missions to the same place?